What's up?
Hey, what's going on, man? Toki, brother.
Yeah,
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for setting it
Good.
up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I'm not a Zoom wizard necessarily, but it says recording. I click the record button. Hopefully, it
Yeah,
should be all good.
it popped up on my screen as well once I joined, so it's a good sign.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you for for talking with me. I think it's gonna be a fun conversation. We have, I guess, for anybody that's listening to this, we have a lot in common, so it's kind of a cool combination. We're both uh, very interested in linguistics. Potentially both studied. I'm not actually not 100% sure if you studied, but I assume because you have a lot of linguistics knowledge. But aside from that, we also have we have an interest in music, Toki Pona, making short videos, all this stuff. So lots in common. I think it's gonna be a great conversation. Uh,
100%. So to clarify, is this episode one of Nardi Cast or whatever you call it?
I've I've had some like monologues where I've been talking with people, or talking without people. I mean, hence monologue. And I've just been kind of like explaining stuff in long form content as opposed to the short video, just to get into some of the stuff people have questions about.
Totally.
And then I did talk to the YouTuber Evil Dia, if you've heard of him. He makes videos in like Esperanto and stuff. So.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Oh, nice.
yeah, this will be the next episode in a series. But yeah, this one will be a fun one because we can really get into some of the linguistic stuff and yeah, all these passions we have in common. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Likewise. It's an honor.
All right, well, I did prepare some questions, so love to hear. But if there's anything you wanted to say ahead of time, feel free.
Um, oh,
Put you on the
it is
spot.
funny. I will clarify because it's funny you say that. I did not actually get a linguistics degree. I'm a fraud.
Okay.
I got international studies degree, but I did do my thesis about Esperanto. So I guess, I remember like the linguistics department at my school, they called me their wayward son. So,
Yeah. No,
but
I mean, I feel like there's so much. Your videos look like very professional, and a lot of um, linguists would be very surprised to hear that you are not that you did not study linguistics. So that I'm also surprised. But yeah, I think there's so many resources. I feel like on the internet, like before I even went to college and actually did major in linguistics, I feel like I already had like at least a few of the first intro level courses just completely checked off, and I was like a high schooler. So
damn,
yeah, I mean, hey, YouTube is or the internet is a good place to learn linguistics.
it
So.
certainly is. That's impressive. Yeah, nice.
All right, well, awesome. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So, I guess just to kind of piggyback off of that, I'm curious about what. So you mentioned your thesis and stuff. So I'm just curious, what got you into linguistics even before that? What sparked your interest in all this stuff?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm sure you also have a very interesting answer too. I'd say my journey, actually, we might have this in common. I don't know about you, but I remember I was 13. It was like the Conlang subreddit came up or something, and that's where it all began. I'd always been like pretty into languages and stuff. I grew up learning Spanish and all this, just because like I grew up in a part of Chicago where there's a lot of people who speak Spanish, and I went to like a Spanish language elementary school and all this
Very
stuff.
cool.
So it was always in the back of my head, the idea of like languages being very interesting and multilingual environments and all that. But yeah, the idea of like conlanging or making my own language was I got into that and then I was like, oh, okay, linguistics as a field, actually this is very interesting. And then there were all those like 2016, 2017 staples on YouTube, Artifactian, Jan Miseli, of
Yeah,
course, um, Zidnath,
exactly. Yeah.
but all those names, and definitely watched a good few of them. But I think it just sort of got more and more serious as I got older. And then by the time I got to college, I was like, all right, this is actually something I could sink my teeth into, and really take seriously. And here we are. What about you? Just out of curiosity, like, what was your spark?
Yeah. Well, yeah, similar for sure because a lot of those content creators that you were just talking about absolutely were in my feed. I loved all of those. And I think conlanging is a really interesting way to get into linguistics because it's like you're seeing it as like an art form. You're like seeing like what you can do with linguistics knowledge as opposed to just like learning it out of a textbook. You're like learning it in like an active process of um, just experimenting, playing around with the different grammatical features and stuff like that. My interest in linguistics really started when I was like just interested in like uh, basically what you it seems like had going on for you in like a bilingual school or something like that. Like, I was always interested like how do you like people just learn a language? Like I started out from more of like the language acquisition side of things. I was like I wanted to learn
Mm.
language. And so that's actually I started off like with that's how I got into conlangs because I was like, constructed languages might be a little easier because they're not as complicated as the natural languages. And so then and then I started learning Esperanto as you were talking about before, and
Ah, yeah.
and then the guy I was talking to the week or two ago, Evil Dia, he made videos in Esperanto, so that was why I wanted to reach out to him because he had some really cool, like just fluent conversations in Esperanto, and he was talking about how it's a really cool way to like learn about linguistics just by learning an kind of easy language because you learn like what the noun classes are or like why does everything like this have the same ending? Like in English, it wouldn't
Mhm.
be like that, but and then you learn like oh, it has the same ending because it has this grammatical property or whatever. So that's how I got into language learning, linguistics, and then the rest is history. I got into I said linguistics more, got really interested in like historical linguistics, and then I studied it in college and then focused a little bit more on like the computational linguistics side of things.
Oh, okay. Were you ever a NACLO kid? Is just out of curiosity.
Oh no, is that the like the competition thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't know if I mean I think we would do this sometimes for like fun in class, but I never like submitted to those. Did you?
Oh, so I think I tried once or twice, but yeah, similarly,
I
no.
guess.
Well, computational linguistics, respect, because that was always like way over my head. So that's awesome, though. All right, very multifaceted kind of journey there.
Yeah, but definitely a lot in common with the conlanging stuff because I feel like a lot of people maybe who just started like I haven't really heard as much about it. It seems like this super. I mean, it is super niche and everything. I won't like I won't like act like everybody's doing it, but it's really common in the linguistics field because it's like a good way to learn about things. So like it's kind of like I wish there's like a good analogy. I don't know. It's like if you're interested in history, you might be interested in like historical fiction and or like if you're interested in science fiction. Um, it's like a good way to kind of elaborate on some of the stuff you've learned in like a classroom or something. So yeah,
Yeah, totally.
is that okay? So yeah, like I was also going to ask you about your like your experience with conlangs and for everybody who maybe doesn't know the term, it's constructed language is what conlang stands for. So it's just like designing a language. So like all this stuff about languages, and you're like, here's how I want this language to work. Here's how I want it to be different from English. Here's how I want it to be the same as this language. Blah blah blah. Anyway, did you ever make your own conlangs? Did you get really into one? Did you just kind of make a bunch of random ones? I know you've learned a few, so
Yeah, right. Well, definitely made a bunch back in the day that never necessarily went anywhere. To expand upon that too, for anyone not in the know, right? There's a lot of different reasons you might make a language. And I kind of went through all of them. There's like you could do something like Tolkien and do like, oh, Elvish. I'm gonna make a world and there's elves in it, and the elves speak the Elvish language. Well, yeah, I know there's a well, Tolkien actually
OG.
had many different yeah, but yeah, you can make a fictional language. I definitely did my fair share of that. I tried my hand at, different world building projects when I was in high school and all that kind of thing. But there's also like we were just talking about Esperanto, which is kind of like the classic auxiliary language or like interlanguage, as they say, that might that anyone could learn and use. At least that being the stated goal. And I tried my hand at that a few times. I feel like that's kind of like I don't know if you would agree, but like I feel like as if you're into conlanging, like everyone tries their hand at making a universal auxiliary language at
Yeah,
some
you got
point.
to be like. I feel like there's a certain amount of like creative drive that comes with being interested in conlangs, where you're like, wait. nobody's made like the perfect language yet. Oh, it's my turn. Like I'm up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like that one XKCD comic, right? There's 14 competing standards. Well, I'll make the one that will unite them
Yeah.
all.
Now there's 15.
Now there's
Yeah.
50. But so I did it later than that. Nothing I would say that I don't have like here's my pride and joy conlang
Yeah.
that I would show off, but
I think that's
definitely
rare to
yeah.
like have that sustained dedication. But yeah, definitely the projects that come out of that, regardless of whether they get as much attention as like something like Esperanto or Toki Pona, they're always really cool. And that you definitely see that in like the Conlang subreddit. Those are
Yeah. Yeah, totally. The really high concept ones. Oh, do you have
yeah.
any going on of your own?
Yeah, I mean, I did some of the stuff you're talking about. I always was interested in like something that would be like functionally useful. Like I did I did make some like art langs, I guess, or I guess languages for just like an artistic purpose that I didn't think, that I just made to be cool.
Yeah.
But those ones I think were when I was before I learned a lot about linguistics. So they honestly probably weren't that like crazy, like and had probably had a pretty crappy romanization. If
Everyone starts somewhere, totally.
yeah, exactly. And then when I got more into when I started thinking like, all right, what are the ones that actually do well? Is like the ones that find people really or people find really useful. It's like that. Then I started kind of trying to make like um, minimalist languages or really compositional ones where you could learn a few roots and build a lot of words off of that. But nothing with a lot of sustained dedication on my front either. So
That's legit. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that's another good like all the kind of like the proof of concept languages or the Eng-langs, if you will, or like
yeah.
the Toki Pona-esque kind of stuff. I always thought that was really cool. So props. I never tried my hand at making one of those, but
Yeah.
that
Well,
seems
yeah,
cool.
it's fun because I feel like people will say, like there's no real Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is not actually a thing. Like you can't really change the way you think with the language. But like if you restrict your language to like a certain amount of words, you sort of do have to think a little differently. So like I think it is like I don't know, it's probably something you'd have to like prove academically or something. But I do think it does kind of like it's just something like Toki Pona or a different minimalist language would really does really incentivize you to think differently, or at least like figure out how to talk about things in different ways, like circumlocute, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Circumlocute. True though.
I don't
True.
actually know if that's the word. I just know that circumlocution is the noun. So
I couldn't tell you. That sounds right. Yeah, but I totally know what you. I was actually just talking with some. This is so random, but earlier I was like, I was applying for jobs, but in the midst of that, I was like, whatever. I was on Human 1011's Discord server, talking with this guy, or so this person was talking about how like they were describing their gripes with Toki Pona, and they
yeah,
were like, oh, it's like if you're okay, this is like niche reference after niche reference, but bear with me. They were like, oh, but like Toki Pona always frustrates me because it's like, oh, it's like building something out of sawdust. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you can build something really cool, and it's the gimmick is like, oh, you made it out of sawdust. That's so sick, but it's like you still built it out of sawdust. Where I was like, okay, well, that's actually what I like about Toki Pona because it's kind of like a fun challenge to yourself to be like, what's the coolest thing I can make out of sawdust? Or like the maybe sawdust. They picked sawdust, and I
yeah.
feel like there's a better one.
Could you explain like what they mean by sawdust?
Yes. So to and they brought it into Minecraft. I was trying to keep the internet references to a minimum, but I'll
Oh,
just go
okay,
all
yeah.
in.
That might be just something that went right
Um,
over my head.
but so they were like, it's like in Minecraft if you were like, this is like the craziest thing ever, but I just made it out of like oak planks or something. And it's cool, but it's like, oh, it might be even cooler if it was made of other stuff
Oh, okay.
besides oak planks. And that so, but I was like, I think it's actually an interesting creative limitation on Toki Pona's part because yeah, it's like there's not really a whole lot of natlangs, if any, that are to
Yeah.
that extent. But as a if you have to circumlocute like about all these different things, yeah, it's like, oh, let me build some. What's the coolest thing I can build out of oak planks? And similarly, oh, what's the most complex or like what? How far can I push Toki Pona? That's a pretty interesting
Yeah.
challenge. It's like
Yeah, because people love challenging themselves with Toki Pona for sure. Like I made a video where I was like defending. So like people always comment like, "Dude, Toki Pona can't describe quantum physics," and I'll be like, "Okay, maybe not. Yeah, maybe it's not perfect for quantum physics. It's not like it's more of like it wasn't designed for just to be making scientific breakthroughs necessarily.
Yeah.
But people in the comments will always be like, dude, that's just a challenge. Like, and then they'll just like they'll do. And I've seen some great guides to like very complicated stuff in Toki Pona because it is like a, you know, yeah, building something out of these bare roots is kind of a challenge, and it is the cool part of it, right? So
Yeah, yeah, totally. Right. It's like there's something to that. So that's awesome.
yeah.
I like that people jumped at that.
Yeah, no, you never challenge a Toki Pona speaker. Well, also a lot of challenges are usually pretty bad. It's like how do you say like this? And it's like, well, what's the context? It's like how do you say like a piece of paper? It's like, well, you just say it's like a lipu, or then it's like, well,
Mhm.
what if it's like I don't know, there's two pieces of paper. It's like all right, and one of them's red and one of them's white, and he's like, you just say the word for white with the white one if you're trying to talk about. It's just like I don't know. That's what I was trying to clarify in this one video because I'm a Toki Pona apologist.
Oh, hey, me too. Me too. Absolutely. Respect.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's similar for Esperanto, right? Is like I think people will criticize Esperanto for things that it could have done differently. Like it doesn't have like a very reduced phonology, so which can be difficult for foreign learners
Mhm.
and stuff. But also, it's like if you spend a million years trying to make your conlang perfect, like it's just never going to go anywhere. Like sometimes you just got to bite the bullet on something and be like, sorry, it's just going to have this phonology. We're just going to see how this works, and it worked pretty
Right.
well. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there's that was actually that was my whole thesis was about that idea because I was like considering Esperanto isn't very well designed. Why is it still by far and away the most successful
yeah,
constructed language on the planet? Like how can those coexist? And eventually I think like a big part of it is like even yeah, Esperanto has such a defined philosophy that it's like even if yeah, like the idea of like a ka distinction is like
yeah,
so silly in an I, but all these things, but all those little like idiosyncrasies give Esperanto like such a defined aesthetic. Um,
yeah. It
there's a
does
lot I
have.
would change. Don't get me wrong, but it's like yeah, if you make the perfect IAL, like every perfect IAL project ends up kind of looking exactly the same. So it's like I don't know, it's tough. But yeah, all those little weird little things, but that's that, Esperanto is what it is because of that. And Toki Pona is what it is because it's not necessarily designed to talk about quantum physics. But
Yeah,
people
no,
do it anyway.
aesthetic value in a language, even if it comes at the cost of maybe being like the most learnable thing or whatever, is honestly a big thing because it's like it shows that you're like sticking to your I don't know, like that your origins, your like goals, like so. Not that, yeah, obviously, as you said, pretty easy to improve Esperanto. Also, I think like a lot of speakers like won't use like the that's what Evil Dio is talking about. A lot of people don't use like the H hat or
Oh, yeah, right, right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, they just scrap. Yeah, so it
yeah,
evolves just like any
yeah.
other
Which
language.
what us linguists are always supporting languages evolving, even constructed ones, especially if they have a somewhat difficult phonology. So yeah, I'm all about that.
Me too.
Well, yeah, kind of we mentioned a few times actually. Right at the beginning of the podcast, Toki Brothers, uh, Toki Pona is a great constructed language that has a lot of speakers and it's done pretty well. Obviously, just talking about defending it and stuff. Could you kind of introduce that idea? I know we've both been interested in it for a while. We both made music in Toki Pona,
Yeah,
like
yeah, right. And
crazy
who
similarities
else
there.
can say that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So, yeah, if you don't mind taking the floor and just kind of telling people about it, and
about Toki Pona.
yeah,
Oof. Okay. All right. The stakes are high. Because I would give you the Toki Pona crown in that respect. But let's see. I'll try my best. Feel free to step in. So Toki Pona is a minimalist constructed language designed by Sonia Lang. Let me scale it back. So there's this Quebecois. I believe she's a linguist by trade, but I don't want to definitively say that. Either way, there's this Quebecois language creator. Her name was Sonia Lang. And I believe back in like the early 2000s, she had this idea where she was like, all right, what if there was a language where there instead of like these all English, we have all these different words for all these different things, but like what if you had a language with an extremely restricted vocabulary? So there was only like originally like 120 words, and you had to just convey everything with those 120 words. And obviously, people are like, oh, well, there's a reason we have all these different words. There's it's so difficult to be precise, but Sonia Lang was hoping it's not like an equivalent to English or Spanish or Russian or Hindi or whatever. It's not trying to be. It's more so like, what would it do to our brains if we try to think about the world in this way? Like, what is actually necessary to say? What are we getting at? What's the core of what we're trying to convey? Or even like maybe the things we end up trying to convey become different because we have such a limited
Yeah,
tool set. So eventually, part of the magic of Toki Pona, and I would argue one of the largest reasons for its enduring success, um, are that it's a very decentralized language, and there's because of that like really strong internal philosophy, like the gimmick of it, I think is really accessible. So there's this huge community of people who use it, and as you were saying, in all these different ways, all these silly ways, but also very, there's all these different art projects around Toki Pona, and people communicate with it in all these different forms. But it's also like Sonia Lang has remained very active in the Toki Pona community, but she's never been like authoritatively like, no, this is how it's used. You're wrong.
yeah, exactly.
She's let it evolve out of her hands. So it's really evolved beyond being Sonia Lang's Conlang. In fact, she actually just a few years ago in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, she put out the Toki Pona dictionary, which and
Cool.
instead of like a tip, yeah, yeah, right, cool, right, my bad. And instead of we think of a typical dictionary, but Ku is set up where you have, all these different Toki Pona words, and it gives like, it was like a poll of Toki Pona users that said, okay, well, 60% of people use this word to describe this way, in this way, and then, oh, also 30% of people use it in this way. So it was more like a decentralized poll of how the language was actually used. It was like a descriptive dictionary rather than a prescriptive dictionary, which is really, I think, very fascinating, but also speaks to the strength of the Toki Pona community. And that's what I would say about it.
Yeah,
That's
no,
my elevator
that's
pitch.
a great overview. Um, yeah, I think that you really captured like the philosophy and why it has this pull amongst people like linguists and people who are interested in languages and stuff like that. Yeah, also the word linguist, I never even know what the heck is a linguist, but yeah, people that are interested in learning languages and linguistics. I think one of the things that's cool is like it's always had this like backdrop of like just like kind of like pushing yourself a little bit, like trying to like trying to think things differently for the sake of it. It's like people will say like, well, like I don't like having to break it down into different words or whatever. Then it's like, okay, well then Toki Pona is maybe not the calling for you. There's tons of really cool ones, but like it is designed to like make you think of stuff differently.
Yeah,
So like that's
yeah, yeah,
that's the cool part of it. That's what a lot of people are really into about it. And it's I I think part of it is like to like just to there's always been kind of like a mental health thing of it too. Is like just kind of like purifying a little bit, to
yeah.
like
Right, right, right.
to think of things in terms of their basic roots. And I've definitely kind of felt that sometimes. It's great for making music and stuff because it kind of lets you strip down a little bit straight to the essentials what you're trying to say. So I like that about it. Yeah, I think there's plenty of different reasons, but in terms of what you're saying about the philosophy of it being kind of the people kind of that is definitely true, and I really think a lot of people love that, and I really like that too. It's like um, it's a conlang is a really interesting thing because you're asking somebody to learn a language that you made up.
Yeah,
so,
right, right, right,
so
right. It's a hard
the
sell.
philosophy should be like pretty open and not too like don't say it like this, very very descriptive, right?
Yeah.
And it is that way with Toki Pona, and I think a lot of people appreciate it, and Sonia Lang is very cool and about all that stuff, and yeah, she's like active or um and active but not necessarily like telling people how to use it. It's just like cool, like supportive.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah, so I do appreciate your breakdown because I never know. I tend to like I feel like a lot of people do this on the internet sometimes, like not necessarily know how to introduce things that are so like familiar to me after so long. So
Yeah.
that was a great intro.
Sweet. I sort of cribbed it for I did a video on Toki Pona maybe a year ago, and I was trying
Oh,
to
okay,
get that in my
perfect. So
head.
you had your
Um,
training run.
there you go.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, I brought up music. I think yeah, I made one video about talking about Toki Pona and music. I don't know. I feel like I never know how niche I can make my videos, but obviously, if I've in the past made literal full songs in Toki Pona, I guess
Yeah.
I'm not at my nichest right now. I think it's good for artistic stuff like that, or a lot of people will make cool scripts for it and stuff like that. The minimalism just makes it really open and stuff like that. So what if have your I know you've made some music in it, and you've also been interested in, I don't know, Toki Pona for a while. So what is your like artistic experience with conlangs in general, or just Toki Pona?
Yeah, that's a great. That's definitely what I want to hear your take about. Because honestly, my so I there were two songs. Yeah, I think I've only done two songs that relate to it, and they were both sort of from a meta perspective. One of them was a collaboration with Jan Misli, the aforementioned Jan Misli, who's a big, Conlang related YouTuber. And they're also very notable. They did like a whole Toki Pona series that's still going on. And we were old friends. I was a moderator of their Discord server when I was 14. So we go back. But so they put me on to do or to produce. They wanted to make like, okay, again, we're just going all in niche wise. They wanted to do, it was like a parody of Brian David Gilbert's Poke Rap, where it was like rapping the names of all the Pokemon. And Jan Misili did rapping every single word in Toki Pona. Because again, there's only like give or take 137 of them. So you can do it in a song. So I produced that. And that was for like the 20th anniversary of Toki Pona in 2021, I think. So August 2021. But I was always sort of on the sidelines, and that like I don't really know Toki Pona, honestly. I'm definitely not fluent in it. Like I've been around it, but I couldn't, if you were just like, all right, Griffin, let's just start riffing in Toki Pona, I would be totally lost. But then I did a song called Yan Pona because I was just like, oh, I wanted to release like a double single with that, just something that was sung. So
Yeah.
and that was again just like it samples Jan Misli saying Yan Pona Pona, which means friend in
Yep.
Toki Pona, or one could construe it to mean friend. It just
It's a
means like
banger, dude.
thank you, I appreciate. But that was more so just like an ode to the Conlang community in general, more so um like as opposed to just like about Toki Pona. But I just thought it was like I liked the idea. I always like, especially now that we're both sort of hitting it big on YouTube and all this stuff. I really like the idea of like, and that we're both musicians. I like the idea of like kind of just doing like regular music, but just like sneaking in like some really niche, like, Toki Pona reference or like the word phryngalization or something, just like
Yeah, no, I know.
making Toki Pona mainstream or something like that. But I never dove fully into just Toki Pona medium music head first like you have. So props for that. What's that been like, and what's the process there artistically?
Well, it's just kind of funny that you mentioned, being having more of like an audience now and talking about it. It's funny because back when I was really just focused on that was honestly for a while I was like really just focused on making Toki Pona music. I was getting a lot of support, and I still am. I think it's awesome, and I'm not done with Toki Pona music at all. But when I was like that was my main thing. The I would notice that like I'd get surges every once in a while, and it'd always be like right after there was some viral TikTok or something. There's like it'd be
Ah,
like etymology nerd made a TikTok about Toki Pona one time, and I
yeah.
noticed like right after that, I was like all of a sudden this big surge, and I think it was like a lot of different Toki Pona, like artists started getting more connection. There's lots of great music in Toki Pona, by the
There
way. Yeah,
is.
for
There
anybody
is.
who hasn't listened, I don't mean to just plug myself. Like there's obviously Jan Usawi, the goat,
The
always.
fuck. I don't know if I won't swear. The oh my God, Yanusawi is insane. Yeah.
Very talented. Yeah, there's plenty of other ones. I like Jan Sepulon, or I never know how much to how to do the phonology. Like should
Yeah,
I
it's
say
it's hard to work
Jan,
it, but yeah, shout out
Jan
to Jan
Sepulon?
Sepun too.
Yeah.
Oh my
But yeah,
God,
great
total
stuff.
goat.
Yeah, I could say a million others, but yeah, that it's a really cool space. Anyway, I got into it just by always being interested in music, always wanting to make music. I made music in English first, and I don't know, like I've always been a self-aware amateur. Always, like releasing stuff despite knowing that it's well below the bar of like commercial success. But like obviously I'm improving over time, and so like I've kind of have I don't know if you look through any of my discography, you can kind of see my artistic journey. Like
Yeah, it's
it
awesome. Yeah.
starts out in a different spot and ends in a different spot. But the Toki Pona was kind of a way of combining my my interest in conlangs and stuff with my musical interest in it, and I figured a lot of people would get a kick out of it for sure. Like there was definitely um, like a like that was part of my motivation. I was like I knew people would be interested in it because there's like I don't know, it's so niche. It would be almost like a meme of itself. Like it's just like it's like why is that? Why is there like a full song in Toki Pona? But there's plenty of stuff out there before I started making music as well. It was just like that was something I wanted to try because I wanted to see what I could do. It's fun.
Totally. And respect. Yeah, I've loved just kind of that musical journey you've taken. Like you said, it's like, if I will, it's sort of like Esperanto in that way. Because I also know what you mean. I release music and I feel like I've been getting better, but it's still like all the techniques of like professional music making are lost on me. But with your music, like the personality's always been there, and now it's like that you're fully dived into something that's very important to you. That sort of idiosyncratic, just like this is your music. It's not like what you think music should sound like. It's just like your music. And I think that's like so much more charming than just like, oh, if you tried to, you know what I mean? Like leaning
Yeah, yeah,
totally
no.
into just the niche. So that's awesome. Yeah. And it bangs. So props.
Well, yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, if anybody's interested, definitely check it out. There's a great playlist of just Toki Pona music in general that's got plenty of other artists, so you can kind of explore the Toki Pona music world. It is a thing. Very cool. Yeah, and then I like just experimenting with languages and stuff. I think it's cool to. I don't know. I've always listened to music in different languages. I don't know for some reason like that is I just get more out of it in a different language because it's like I'm kind of like doing exercise for my brain, like I'm
Totally.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
practicing at the same time. But that's just kind of like a one of my nerdy habits. So then I also like making music in different languages as well. But
I totally know what you mean. Yeah. It's like an extra bit of brain food. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
exactly. So yeah, well, yeah, thanks for talking about that and for getting into it with me. It's definitely one of my passions. I don't get to talk about too much.
I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah. No. So
it's
likewise. Thank
it's
you.
a, it's a little hard to like bring up at with a stranger, right? Like, hey, by the
It's
way, did you know I make
it's like
music in a niche constructed language with like less than I don't know, like I don't know. I don't even know what the number of fluent speakers is. It all comes down to what is your definition of fluency? That's a good next question to have
in Tokipona?
in a language, just in
Oh,
general,
in a
because
language.
I have my own idiosyncratic definitions and stuff, but like I know that I don't know. I know everybody kind of thinks of it differently.
Let's see. Well, I think if you can circumlocute, and I'm just kidding. Oh, let's see. That's a good question, honestly, because it's like kind of like one of those like, oh, you know when you know. But not really though.
No,
You
definitely you
really
don't.
don't. Yeah, you really don't. So I would say, because a lot of people ask, because like similarly, yeah, like as people who are very interested in learning languages, there's a lot of stake in it. I'd like to say I'm fluent in Spanish. And maybe there was a time in my life where I would have said I was fluent in Spanish. No longer, but um, I feel like fluency. In my head, it's like you can communicate with no issue, which is very kind of a nothing burger of a definition because I have plenty of issues when I communicate in English, and I would say I'm fluent in English, of course. But I feel like there's no external roadblock when I'm thinking in English between thought and sound coming out of my mouth. Sometimes I'll like think about how I want to word something, especially if it's particularly emotionally charged or something. But normally, like right now, I'm just the words are
Just off the
just
cuff, yeah.
spilling out of me for better and for worse. I'm just talking and talking. And in Spanish, I could kind of talk and talk, but there would definitely be more of a hiatus because I would sort of have to pause for a second and think, oh, okay, how would I say that in English?
Yeah.
Okay. And then in other languages, and of course, I guess Toki Pona is a little difficult because by nature of Toki Pona, you're not going to be phrasing anything like you would phrase it
No.
in any other language, really. Um, so, what's your definition of fluency, and how would you apply it to
Well,
Toki Pona?
honestly, you're basically just at the end there saying pretty much what I would say is like I guess I guess that's kind of hard. Like I feel like there's two like competing sides of or just separate sides of fluency that aren't necessarily as related as you'd think. Like, and this is a I think a lot of people who were like raised bilingual might relate to this. Is like you can be passively fluent in a language but not really be that good at speaking it. So like you can understand it very well,
Yeah,
but so that'd be like passive fluency, and it's like obviously that is like a thing, and it's like in terms of competence with the language, being able to understand is huge. So like it's not like it is half of it. So like if you're passively fluent, I mean that is a type of fluency for sure. But
yeah,
then I think it's entirely possible to be passively fluent and not really know how to say things very well, or to know how to say things very well and not really be that capable of understanding people.
totally.
So I think there's definitely ways to study languages that those are more related because there's obviously lots of it's the same language so either way. But yeah, I would say like what you were talking about. I'd say that is like usually what I'm talking about when I talk about fluency is like active fluency. It's like you're you're like talking and you're really there's no like break. Yeah, it's just kind of like you don't really need to think about words. Like you're not really you're thinking about like concepts and not really words, and then and just kind of coming out. And
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, concepts are
yeah,
not really words. Yeah.
well, yeah, I just made it short about telepathy and how that would be like different. It,
Oh,
like from if like linguistically how that would work because it's like you're just
oh.
talking and it's just like you don't have to do like the word part. So like it's basically how it feels to be fluent anyway. But then the other person on the receiving end wouldn't have to like would just be like immediately feeling your I don't know. That's
That's
I thought
actually
it was
that's a
like
great
interesting.
point. Yeah, that is interesting. I never thought about that, but huh. Yeah,
I
because
used
you'll
to
just
just
be
be
like,
quicker fluency basically. But yeah,
hmm,
no, I mean I agree with what you're saying. Like it's like um, fluency is like yeah you're not doing as much translating and Toki Pona depends on like my state of mind. But there are definitely times where I feel like I'm able to like express certain things. Obviously it depends on what I'm talking about. Might switch languages in my head, but I'm able to think about things in Toki Pona pretty quickly. I don't know, just
wow.
it
Yeah,
just depends.
respect.
Yeah, but I don't. I actually probably have very poor passive fluency to Toki Pona. Although I've
Mm.
tried to listen to it before, but and sort of understood. But it's like it's because I guess I don't know. Like I haven't had a lot of conversations in it. It's more just been kind of composing and reading and
Yeah.
stuff.
It feels very like a like very well because the way that anyone for example like you the way you might define a hospital might be very different to the way I define a hospital
Yeah,
or like, literally anything so like it kind of makes sense to me in that way that like how you define anything in Tokipona is so tied to you that like hearing someone else's interpretation within context of a larger utterance would be like so you would take it would be like a logic puzzle trying to figure out exactly what they're talking about which is part of the fun but
yeah. No, true. I
um
mean, it's all about the kind of trying to figure out what they're saying in the context, right? Is like that's a big word
right.
for Toki Pona is like um they could be saying if I was outside, this might mean something than inside.
Yeah,
Depending
yeah,
on
no,
the context.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like you don't say floor when you're outside usually. I mean, I actually have heard people say that. So hey, maybe that's like a concept for a video or something. But
huh.
but
Yeah, wait.
I have heard people outside say say refer to the ground, which is what I would normally say is outside, as the floor before. Um,
There.
but for the most part, at least where I'm from, you'd say floor inside, ground outside. Whereas like Tokipono would just be like, I don't care, like just like flat,
But oh,
super.
also I really hate to throw a
Oh,
wrench in this,
is
but
it time now?
yeah, the Zoom is timing out. Should I just make a new one and get that going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no point in cutting somebody off halfway through a sentence.
Like,
So.
so that's let me stop recording. All right, welcome back.
I was wrong way for a second. Yeah, that was a lot quicker than I thought. I mean, my laptop was a little slow with that saving process.
Hey, well, no, well, I'm glad we know it's nice. That's where you can put the Raid Shadow Legends plug, the little animation going. So we're set.
Yeah, some, yeah, I'll put, I don't know. I think this one will be a lot more clear. Honestly, when there was a break in the last Zoom recording I had, it was really like honestly hard to tell what was going on. It was just like randomly shut off, and then like so I had to kind of like put a little like explanation in there. But yeah, this is good. Yeah, it's a good break point. Is what I was saying. Because honestly, one of the things we haven't talked about as much is like the subject of a lot of your videos and like the stuff that I think you've made really like cool content about is like um, just general like thinking about different languages and like historical linguistics and stuff like that. And so I wanted to know like kind of what are some things you think maybe or like misconceptions or just like ideas that a lot of people don't know about like linguistics or historical linguistics specifically. Because I don't know, so like I feel like a lot of people have this like one thing. It's like it's just kind of always surprising me that people don't know this or whatever, you know?
That's a great question. Yeah, and thank you, first of all. And definitely likewise. I'll pick your brain about those pronunciation videos where you go from like PIE to anyway. But for me, it's tough, you know. Okay, it is a blessing and a curse with linguistics. Primarily a blessing that how accessible linguistics is. It's amazing. And I think it's also like I think part of the reason that we're able to really kind of take off doing the kind of content we do is that everyone has a personal stake in linguistics, right? Because everyone uses a language.
Yeah.
So everyone has some point of reference when you're talking about how languages work. You can be like, oh, well, my, first language is, yeah. Um, Now, the reason I say curse at all is because it's so personal, and I'm certain no one's immune to this. Even if you're like a professor of linguistics who speaks 10 different languages, you're gonna have a bias because you learned one of them or at least a few of them first, before anything, and it's a lot different the relationship you have to a language you grew up speaking versus the one you picked up um, out of curiosity when you were 20, right? Um, and with that in mind, um. Trying to think of it's like hmm, it's tough. I'm like so I'll do these videos about languages and their history and yeah, like there's some of the comments you'd expect are like the kind of like weird nationalist ones and those are I think pretty easy to
Yeah.
ignore. Like I'm not like gonna critically engage with something that's like, oh, this country sucks. Why would you do a video in this language? I'm like, okay. But more broadly than that, um I'm happy to say I like so many of the comments are get actually really positive or just curious. And when I talk to people about this sort of thing in real life, it rarely goes beyond, oh, well, how many languages do you speak? Which is fine. But hmm, okay. I'm done roundabouting.
Hey, sorry to put you on the
Let me
spot, but
lock it. No, 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 it's fine.
that was a great prelude to a response regardless. I think you touched on a lot of important things anyway. So
I'll take it. I think the misconception, or what I wish everyone knew about languages. Okay, what I do wish everyone knew about languages, and I just talked about this in the most recent video I did about grammatical gender, is that languages aren't like conscious constructs. They are social constructs, but they're not the
yeah.
product of like people sitting at a table and they're like, okay, what's our word for
Except for Esperanto, I remember you
Yes,
added
right, of course.
that.
The vast majority of world languages, they're not a product of like, yeah, a group of people sitting at a table and being like, what's this going to be called? How about this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is like, and when people talk about like the irregularities, or of course, the one that always bugs me is like, oh, well, X language is so much more complex than this language, or like,
Yeah.
oh, if this language would just get rid of grammatical gender, it would be so much more simpler and easy to learn. I'm like, oh, no, that's just not how that stuff works. But I get why people think that, of
Yeah, no,
course.
I mean it's like it's what I was talking about before. It's like sometimes hard to like get out of your own headspace and like think about like and genuinely be like, okay, yeah, like they're not like trying to fuck with me right now. Like I started first.
How
I don't
do
know
yeah.
if this is a PG podcast or not, but they're not they genuinely like are really curious or like confused or like and if they're like angry, it's like they're not like just like trying to like troll you. It's like a lot of people are just genuinely like they just don't they're they just would could really use a great explanation about it, and that's why I love your videos and like the yeah explaining like gender and stuff is like it honestly is like it's something everybody has like has heard reference because everybody's especially in the United States, just like learn a little bit of Spanish or something, or like German or something.
Hmm.
But then it's like, wait, but like, what even is that? Like, or
Yeah, right,
why would they choose to do that? But so
right.
like, yeah, language isn't a conscious thing necessarily. I mean, there's the Royal Academia Española,
Right, right. Yeah, there's
yeah,
nuance. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's not. Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting once you get in the mindset of like instead of being like, oh, this is right and this is wrong, and you instead look at language from like a just like you would look at like a mountain and be like, why is this mountain here? And then you can be like, oh, well, the tectonic, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah,
obviously sociology is a much different bag than geology, but to be like, why did this happen from more of like a step back segment? Yeah. So it's interesting, but again, all it takes is just some good faith explanation, and most people are able to
yeah.
get their head around that sort of thing. But what
Yeah, no,
about
and I definitely think there's a lot of people who are really open to these kinds of explanations and stuff, and um, really like engaging comments and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's like it is a great space because you're right. It's like everybody has a little bit of a stake in it because it's like, why do I say this? Like I never actually even thought about why I say this, but then. But then you have like a bunch of questions and you talk about it, and then it's like, and especially if there's like some sort of way to like connect it to something else, and but a lot of people are, um, even if they don't have a background in linguistics, are pointing out stuff in the comments that I would never would have thought of at all. So it's like it is, yeah, it's like an interesting thing where everybody has a stake in it, but it also is like its own thing, like its own line of study as well. So
totally, totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think like I don't know, what do you think like the analogy of like a language is like an organism and be like it works really well for like historical linguistics because you know like there's like you can have different like lineages of languages and stuff. What are the pros and cons to that? Do you think?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm fond of that analogy too. Not saying it's perfect, of course, but yeah, it's okay. I actually quite like it because as a baseline, it's quite interesting, and I do think it works in some ways. But even when you dive into it and actually pick it apart and scrutinize it and the ways it doesn't work, that in itself is very interesting as
Yeah.
well. So to clarify exactly what I mean by that, I do like the idea that languages do evolve and on sort of not necessarily guidedly in the organism does, right?
Oh,
Um,
you might have just messed with your mic or something. Yeah.
Tragedy
Oh,
strikes.
there's back.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Uh, can you?
It was good for like a half of that sentence before. Uh,
Okay.
okay,
Are we
good.
good now?
All right,
Okay,
perfect.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I like that. Because just like an organism, things evolve in all these different roundabout ways. And similarly to an organism, I like the analogy of like sort of a vestigial body part to some of the stranger things about languages too. Or like, oh,
Yeah.
why are verbs irregular? Well, why do we have pinky toes? You know what I mean? It doesn't like inhibit anything.
What's an appendix for? Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and similarly to like an appendix or something, maybe you eventually sort of scrutinize it something you're like, oh, well, this does actually serve some sort of purpose, just like,
Yeah.
but and the ways it doesn't work is that I do find obviously, okay, this is really silly. Um, and I hate the idea of IQ as a concept. So let me scrap that. I'm just referencing the meme here as a tool of explanation.
Okay.
Like the
Yes,
curve
the
meme
curve. Yeah,
where it's like, oh yeah, the enlightened wizard figures things that I hate such silly
yeah.
meme. But I like the idea of like, yeah, as a baseline, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like, you know, people languages are just things that people choose, and languages are the products of good decisions, and there are right ways to speak and wrong ways to speak. And that idea is incorrect, of course. But then the middle is like where I think we're at as linguists a lot of the time, or certainly as people who make videos about linguistics, because you can challenge that initial perception. You can just start getting into that. But then once you really, like you brought in the RAE, right, or the Real Académica Española, da, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, they're not deciding how Spanish is, but their decisions do impact the way that Spanish speakers perceive themselves when they speak Spanish, and that's bound to have an impact. Or similarly, like how we say, like, oh, Shakespeare coined all these words in English, and that's not necessarily 100% true in the way that he just sat down and was like, eyeball, forsooth.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, what I don't know if he coined the word forsooth. I was just like, what's another old timey word? But yeah, there's all these examples of like, and In reality, yeah, he probably just maybe was the first person to write them down, or same with like Geoffrey Chaucer was like,
Yeah.
maybe the first person to write these things down. We don't know if they were spoken or not, but that's not to say that individual people can't have pretty appreciably significant influences on the way a language is spoken. That's absolutely true. Like
Yeah.
Kai Cenat, did Kai Cenat make up Riz? I'm not actually sure. I'll have to do more research on that, but let's say he did. That's
Yeah, I mean
huge, right? Like,
it
yeah,
takes
like, and
over, yeah.
that's totally, that has changed the way that people speak.
Yeah, well, I actually I made a video about you guys how like guy
Oh yeah,
this was a
yeah,
dude
yeah.
like it's just a person. So like yeah, it's a good point. Like in biology, you tend not to really think of like an organism, like a part of an organism, like it's like a cell really having any control because it really doesn't, right?
Hmm.
But like yeah, individual people, speakers of a language, kind of like the cells of the language, definitely can yeah, as you said, like that example, like can have a large impact on how it's spoken. So
Yeah. Or I think another one I like to, yeah, because you guys is another great example, I think, because it's like there's a dialectal aspect to that. But I also know pe plenty of people who are like they don't maybe they're not necessarily fond of being addressed that way, and then it's like okay, well then you go a different direction, and we're
yeah,
all
true, yeah,
we're conscious beings, like we can choose to we're
exactly.
impacted by those broader trends, but we also have we do have control. We're not those cells, right?
So
Or
it's like there's prescriptivism, descriptivism, and then like descriptive realism or
yeah,
something
yeah, or
like
something like that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
I agree with what you're saying. Like you don't necessarily always want to be like referencing like IQ or something, but it is a useful like format of like there are certain barriers that you kind of like or like just phases that you have when you're like engaging
Yeah,
with certain fields. Like right, like you're
yeah.
like
Like the
yeah, so,
iceberg chart or something, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about like how smart you are. It's just more about like how tired you get of like being in this one phase. Like
Exactly. Yes.
yeah.
So what would your, just out of curiosity, is there something that kind of grinds your gears in that way, or is there something that you wish more people knew linguistics wise?
Oh, sorry. You got kind of garbled up there, but
Ooh,
maybe my
that's
Wi-Fi is a little bad. It's back now, I think.
okay. All right. So I'll ask that again.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you wish more people knew linguistic wise, or something that sort of gets on your nerves in that way?
Yeah, well, I think like one thing is like languages. It's like languages are not as tied to like your own like personal history as you'd think, or like your ancestry as you'd think. Like a lot of people are, especially like the nationalist kind of stuff, and like are really tied to like languages as if like they're almost like synonymous with like DNA or something.
Hmm.
But like realistically, like a lot of languages are always shifting, and there's always a lot of variety. And like like if I don't know, like something I was thinking about recently, it's like if you learn like a national language, you're basically just learning like one standard dialect that like I don't know, even if you're like have ancestry in that country, like it's like you probably didn't have all of your ancestry from specifically there, and like it's just like
Oh, I
it's a
see
lot
what you're
more
saying.
complicated. Like you have
Yeah.
yeah, like you have anybody if you just go back far enough has ancestors from all over, and there's um and with plenty of different linguistic diversity there, and it's just like that's something you should embrace. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be like purist like that, like you have to learn the always the perfect
Oh,
like
yeah,
language of your
yeah.
identity or something. Like you can just learn whatever language is like seems like it's just like your current passion, because it's like it really isn't that complicated. Like you really yeah, it's like you don't owe it to I don't know, I don't know, like your great grandma to like speak exactly like she did, I guess.
Right, yeah, right, yeah. It's that is sort of unfortunately it's a little well maybe not unfortunately, but it's just yeah, like you said, the language if we like Old
Yeah.
English is we would have to be taught Old English
Yeah,
because
exactly.
completely different language than current English. And but similarly it's like it's there's I also kind of like that idea too because it's like even let's say like you have roots in Turkey or something like that or like you're maybe Turkish American. I don't know, I'm going with Turkey, but just for I don't know.
I actually
Um,
I have a friend who doesn't have Turkish ancestry, but he's fluent in Turkey, so maybe this will be
oh,
relevant.
cool. All right, that's awesome.
Or
But like, yeah,
Turkish. Yeah.
like if you don't speak Turkish, but you're like, oh, like I want to be more connected to my ancestry and stuff. Yeah, like if you learned modern Turkish, maybe that wouldn't necessarily. That's not going to be the Turkish that um, your great grandparents spoke, but it's also definitely not going to
Yeah.
be the Turkish that if you're from a specific part of Turkey. But despite that, if we're going with the same, the act of learning Turkish itself, just because of all the rabbit holes that you'll find yourself in and the opportunities that will be given to you from learning Turkish, you will find yourself connected to Turkey in a different way,
Yeah,
and that's cool.
exactly.
Even if it's not the dialect that your
Yeah,
grandparents
exactly. Yeah, no,
spoke.
yeah, you can get closer for sure.
Yeah,
So it is, yeah, it's not necessarily like don't engage with your, I don't know, heritage at all, but
I definitely get what you're saying
yeah,
though, like
yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, honestly, that's just kind of something I've been thinking about. I kind of, I was like, I asked you a pointing question, put yourself or put you on the spot that I actually didn't know what the heck I was going to say. Um, uh, but yeah, I just like, I've been really interested recently in like historical linguistics, like more than I necessarily was in like college. So like, it's kind of just
Hmm,
something, it's honestly kind of been sort of an incentive for making videos and stuff because it's like, I'll learn something about, some ancient language or whatever, or some sound change or whatever that happened, and I'll be like, wait, like this is actually kind of wild. Like this is kind of similar to something today, and then um,
totally.
those are kind of thoughts I have. So like, I guess if I was thinking like, is there a guiding principle here, like about learning about all this stuff? And I was wondering if you'd be able to put it into words better than me, but maybe it's not so simple.
Oh, I know. I get you. I wish I could. I would hardly call myself a historical linguistics expert, but I agree. It is like there's something very fascinating about it, or just like as a vehicle for learning more about social history in general,
Yeah,
or like as if language is a product of society, learning about languages tells you something about society. Not in like a superior worth way necessarily.
yeah.
More so it's just like, yeah. Anyway, I get what you're saying. So,
Yeah, like the Sapir Whorf thing is like interesting because it's like there's languages that are drastically different from English or just modern like languages in general. Like Piraha is always the example. Like even if you don't like even if you think maybe somebody was getting exaggerated, regardless it's a very different language from any language I'm familiar with. So it's like why is that necessarily? Obviously, like something like phonology is like whatever that could just be for whatever reason. I
mhm.
think I think there are like some attempts to like explain like why the phonology of like certain communities is like more reduced than
Yeah,
that. But
right, right, right,
I
right.
never fully understood it, but
Yeah.
but maybe there is a reason for that. But more what I'm talking about is like like why don't they have numbers past two or something? I don't, or there's other languages that don't have numbers like many numbers at all. And it's like I don't know, like it kind of puts me in like Toki Pona mode. It's like I don't know, like do you need that really for everything? Like maybe it's just like if your culture doesn't require you to think about numbers like that very much, or at least communicate them, then it's like you're fine. That you don't really need it in your language.
Yeah, right.
But whereas it's not really that they're being limited by the lack of numbers
Yeah,
in that.
yeah, exactly. And it's not, yeah, I think people are like, oh, your brain will be completely messed up if you, no, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're all human. It's just, yeah, it's interesting. It's just like the idea, I think that tells us something about the idea that like, oh, well, this specific construct of what math is, we want it to be universal, but like, yeah, no,
Yeah,
human
no,
experience is a lot more rich than that, actually.
yes, exactly. That's okay. Maybe that's the general thing. There we go. You
Yes.
got it out of me. Um,
Yeah. I'll take
I think it's just yeah. It's like there's a lot of I don't know. Like there's obviously there are human universals, right? There are things that like everybody, most people have like a nose with two nostrils, but there are a lot of things that can be different, wildly different between cultures, and like the explanation doesn't always need to be like causal. Like it can just be like it's just like people can be different. Like it
yeah, 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 right.
like uh like click consonants or whatever. They're really. I was like researching that for a video um,
Yeah.
earlier, and it was like I don't know, like why do they have these? Like it must be like they're like a really ancient group, like an ancient lineage, like split off from the rest of modern populations a long time ago. It must be that everybody used to have click consonants, and then they got lost everywhere else. So it's like, or it could just be like that, just like groups in different places just like get random stuff if you just leave them alone for a while. Like that's honestly what I think is a more reasonable explanation, especially and same with like pure aha. It's like you just isolate people. Like there's a lot of different paths that you could go down, right?
Yeah,
So maybe that's
exactly.
my general
Exactly.
my general idea, maybe.
Totally. There's a lot of paths you can go down, right? A lot of different
Yeah.
ways to convey point A to point B. So,
So there's infinite content for language YouTubers, or if you're a conlanger, infinite ideas that you can make. It's
Boom.
language
True.
is kind of by definition infinite, right?
Yeah.
Because you can always add another relative clause or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's so trippy. Um, but that's a good explanation, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been enjoying your videos. Been I think it is cool that we've found like a similar niche. It's because it's cool to see that people are so interested in it. I feel like in my
Yeah.
daily life I don't get to talk about this stuff as much. So that's another great reason to be talking to someone like you. Because like you'd obviously right up my alley in terms of these topics. So
Likewise. No, it's true. It's a great pleasure. Yeah, because I don't know about you, but not a whole lot of opportunities to get
exactly.
into historical linguistics in general, or really anything related to linguistics beyond the surface level. So concurrently,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. It's like when you're learning a language in monolingual United States and you want to talk to somebody, so you have to force people to talk to you. It's a yeah, similar thing. But yeah, this is a great conversation. I know it's kind of free form and maybe kind of jumped over a lot of different things, but I think that's fun. But I'd be happy to like have a conversation in the future, maybe about something specific or whatever.
Totally.
But yeah,
Yeah,
this
for
is
sure.
this is great, and yeah, I think it sounds like your laptop is in better shape than mine. So yeah, hopefully,
Uh-oh.
hopefully we won't need to do too much editing or anything. So I think people will maybe get a kick out of this.
I think
No way.
I might have
I jinxed it. I
messed.
jinxed it. You froze for a second.
No, I know I spoke too soon. But I heard the audio part. And I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, but I would absolutely I would love to keep this going. And for the time being, it's always a pleasure. But I'm very excited to see where your podcast series goes, and in general where the videos go. You're making some absolute bangers, so it's an honor. But yeah, for the time being, I'll get this going and send you over the files and let the magic happen.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and likewise with your videos. Yeah, I'm definitely want to keep it going, and you're always welcome on my. I didn't even come up with a name. It's just Nardi's Linguistics podcast.
Perfect. Hey,
you're
rolls right off the
always a
tongue.
welcome guest.
Nardi cast,
All
maybe.
right.
I'll take it.
Well,
All right.
yeah, but sure. Yeah, but I'll experiment. I would have to change all my thumbnails, but whatever.
All right. Well, it's been an honor. I'll see you later, Nardi. Have a
Yep.
wonderful rest of your day, man.
Peace out.